This is the planet we share, with its creatures, its power, and its vulnerability. Each week we travel above, below, and across its surface on a journey of discovery. Today we take to the skies for a new perspective on what it takes to save Africa's wildlife. We'll dive into the center of a feeding frenzy. Alaska's humpbacks are hungry for herring. And we'll trek deep into the forest of Brazil in search of the jaguar. Can South America's ranchers learn to live with one of the world's most powerful cats? This is Wild Chronicles.
Sponsored by National Geographic Mission Programs, taking science and exploration into the new millennium. Additional support provided by World Wildlife Fund, saving wildlife and wild places, and by Lindblad Expeditions, celebrating 5 decades of exploration to the wildest places on Earth.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another edition of Wild Chronicles. I'm Boyd Matson, and we got a great show for you this week, beginning 500 feet above the ground in Africa. That's where conservationist Mike Fay has spent months on an unprecedented aerial mission to document the impact of people on the continent. Mike explores the so-called human footprint, highlighted in this Wildlife Conservation Society map. The areas of yellow, orange, and finally red show where human influence is the greatest. So let's join Mike as he flies off the beaten path in search of Africa's last wild places.
He logged 60,000 miles and took a staggering 110,000 aerial photographs, documenting an awesome world of vanishing beasts and burgeoning human development. National Geographic Explorer-in-Residence J. Michael Fay's Cessna was mounted with a camera that took a high-resolution photo every 20 seconds as he crisscrossed low over the African continent.
When you drive along a road or you walk on a human trail, you're in that human world, whereas if you're flying over, you traverse those boundaries and you can go deep into landscapes where people usually don't go.
As Fay's innovative approach highlights, Africa's great wild animals are in peril, in part because their natural habitats are losing ground to human development. The population of African lions is down 45 to 70% in the past decade. African elephants are now at only 1% of what they were a century ago. And eastern lowland gorillas, in their main habitat in the Congo, have declined by 70% in just the last 10 years. In fact, Fay discovered there are few places left where the wildlife is truly wild. Most notably, the deepest regions of the Congo and the barren wastelands of the Sahara.
There are a few places left on the continent where wildlife is just there because there's not enough humans to kill it off. But those places are very rare.
The big thing that's happened in the world in the past 30 years is that humans' ability to exploit resources has kind of grown exponentially. So our ability to destroy ecosystems is complete now.
But Fay also found animals that are thriving in protected parks and game preserves.
So where you see wildlife today, that means because humans are protecting it. That's why it's still there. There's some kind of human management that's being applied that says, no, we want to maintain this wildlife population.
One example is the Mala Mala Game Park, where Fay landed briefly. Mala Mala comprises the largest parcel of privately owned land in South Africa. Back in 1964, this was the first game reserve in Africa to make the transition from hunting safaris to photographic safaris. They discovered wildlife here today is abundant. In contrast, he found a grimmer scene in Tanzania at the Katavi National Park. Hundreds of hippos crowd into a fast-drying river. They do this every dry season, but Faye believes they're being imperiled by people upstream who are diverting water for crop irrigation and cattle.
You could hardly even tell they were hippos because they're just these bumps, and then you realize they're alive, and you just can't believe it. If they don't get rain in another 2 weeks, they're dead.
The kaleidoscope of images Faye captured during his journey are alternately devastating and heartening. A million birds take to the skies over a lake in Botswana. Protected chimpanzees thrive at the Mahale National Park in Tanzania. Massive fires, many set by people clearing land for crops, rage out of control on the savannah. Tourism has become a powerful economic incentive to protect the continent's animals. Humans, according to Faye, have the power to destroy Africa and the power to protect it. Ultimately, the flyover's greatest contribution may be that it sparks a dialogue, a plan, a commitment to saving what's left. This unprecedented view of Africa's last wild places, of its failures and its successes, could help us manage the impact of our human footprint.
Have you ever wondered what a lion sees as it quietly stalks and then brings down a springbok? Have you ever wanted a bird's eye view of a hawk on a death-defying dive toward a dove? Well, then you need to look through the lens of an evolving technology known as Crittercam, developed by National Geographic. It's providing scientists with incredible insights into natural behaviors, some of which have never been seen before by human eyes. Watch now as we attempt to attach a Crittercam to a feeding humpback whale.
A chilly morning in the deep waters of Chatham Strait. Alaska's humpbacks are hungry for herring. Fred Sharp of the Alaska Whale Foundation has studied these whales for 15 summers.
It's almost like coming home now, and it's almost like coming to see your own family. They are unlike any other population of whales worldwide.
Today, Fred may see something that no one has ever seen before. A whale's eye view of mealtime. A view that could help ensure the survival of this endangered species. No one has seen exactly what goes on beneath the waves, but this is the view from the surface during lunge or bubble net feeding.
You've got some that blow the bubbles, other individuals that go down and herd the prey towards the surface, and other individuals that scream these incredibly beautiful and haunting sounds to clump the prey up and force them up towards the surface into the confines of the bubble net. And they all get together in the group and they come charging up through this tunnel of bubbles, almost like missiles coming up through a silo, and then engulf the prey in their huge mouths at the surface. It's an incredible feeding event.
Now, let's watch that again in slow motion. Notice the ring of bubbles that forces the panicked herring to cluster into a tight ball. Then the humpbacks shoot up through the ring, their mouths agape, in a giant funnel to trap their prey. It's an event Fred has studied for nearly 2 decades, above the waves. But to confirm what's really going on here, he needs to see the bubble net from inside and out. Fortunately, National Geographic's Birgit Boulaier has the technology to help, an ingenious amalgamation of science and technology. This is Crittercam. Inside this waterproof housing is a miniature laboratory and television studio. There's a tiny camera, sensors that measure water temperature, depth, and speed, even a microphone, all bound together with microprocessors. Now the team just has to attach it to a feeding giant.
The system itself sits on a suction cup. You know, we're out in a small boat, we're bouncing around in the waves, trying to get close to very big animals. And we do that for 5 hours at a time, just to get to the point where we're actually close enough.
Coming up, coming up!
Their research vessel seems impossibly tiny and offers scant protection. Just inches away, 40 tons of raw power.
I saw this massive fluke just come up the side, and I just looked away. I just felt the fluke kind of coming up and scraping along my back and whacking me over the head. And then the next thing was just this water splash all over the boat. And yeah, I thought this gives you a little taste of the power that these animals have in their bodies and what they could do if they just wanted to.
The cold, wet hours drag on. Finally, at the end of a lunge, success.
They sort of slowed down and just sort of snuck up behind them, and Mike reached out with a pole, and we were able to get a nice attachment.
And now, for the first time, we see what the whales see. Humpbacks, it turns out, use their huge pectoral fins to corral fish, and not as originally thought, just for maneuverability and locomotion. And despite the whale's amazing coordinated effort, they are actually much less successful at catching fish than Fred and other scientists believed. A lot of herring escape. One of the greatest threats to the humpback whale may be the dwindling supply of herring and other prey fish. This Crittercam footage will help scientists understand what it takes for the whales to get a good meal, and may also lead to better management of their prey fish.
It's unique. It's absolutely unique. That's the real privilege. I think nobody has seen this stuff before. We get insights into these animals' lives. There's just no other way of getting it, and nobody else on this planet has gotten them before.
The video may look greenish and grainy, but to these researchers, it's pure gold.
We've broken the code. We've gotten in there, and we're seeing what the whale sees. It's incredible.
Animals have some amazing and sometimes unusual ways of surviving in the wild. For example, in the case of those herring you just saw being eaten by humpbacks, it may be survival of the rudest. Flatulence is considered a social faux pas among humans, but passing gas just may bring these small fish closer together. Researchers have discovered that some types of herring break wind while swimming, producing a high-pitched buzzing sound that they can hear, but most other fish can't. Schools of herring may use this secret language to communicate at night without alerting predators to their presence. But these flatulent fish aren't totally in the clear. Herring-eating whales and dolphins could be listening in as well, giving them an audible invitation to an easy meal. Over the past few years, thermal imagery cameras have managed to spot some increasingly rare, though not unwelcome visitors crossing the U.S.-Mexican border. Jaguars. Their range used to stretch from Arizona all the way down to Argentina, but aggressive hunting and habitat loss has cut their territory in half, and it's still shrinking. But one conservationist is working to give the jaguars a permanent home.
The Guarani Indians named him Jaguar, the beast that kills in a single bound. The jaguar's ability to kill its prey with a crushing bite makes it one of the most feared and respected predators in the Americas. Yet it is an animal we know surprisingly little about. Jaguars need wilderness, safe territory where they can roam, hunt, and raise their cubs. But conservationists have to know how much space they need to make room for these elusive cats around human settlements. More than 1.5 billion acres of jaguar habitat have been lost to development, and the big cats are moving into increasingly isolated pockets of wilderness. Alan Rabinowitz of the Wildlife Conservation Society has made it his lifelong quest to save the big cats.
When I first heard jaguars in the jungle, I couldn't see them. I was out at night. I could hear two of them vocalizing to each other with these guttural grunts, these ooh, ooh, ooh. It was one of those things that knocks the wind out of you.
Rabinowitz wants to create a Jaguar Corridor, stretching from Mexico to Argentina, a continuous chain of public and private lands across the jaguar's existing range, so these majestic cats can thrive. Brazil's Pantanal is potentially the largest and most critical part of this corridor, roughly 55,000 square miles of swamps and marshes. But over 90% of the Pantanal is privately owned, and many ranchers say the best jaguar is a dead jaguar. About 4 million head of cattle roam the ranch land. And locals say the jaguars are killing their cattle to the tune of hundreds of thousands of dollars a year. But WCS conservationist Sandra Cavalcanti believes that problem may have been exaggerated.
I do believe that jaguars and people can coexist in Pantanal just the same way they have been doing for years. The thing is that we have to figure out how to do it. This is a collar, a GPS collar made for a male jaguar. It's a pretty big one. And jaguars here are really big. They can weigh up to 180 pounds, a big male, an adult male. And this subspecies in Pantanal is one of the largest ones.
Its size, strength, and stealth make the jaguar one of the most difficult animals to study and among the most dangerous to catch. To increase the chances of capture, Sandra enlists the aid of local hunters. 7 exhausting hours later, a shot from a dart gun punctures the stillness of the forest. It's rare that Sandra will actually handle a cat, but she doesn't have much time to savor this close encounter.
Now we're just going to make sure that her temperature, her pulse, and her respiration is fine. And then we're going to get away from her and let her recover.
Over the next year, data from the satellite tags begins coming in. The cat some ranchers love to hate, the one that lives exclusively off their livestock, turns out to be mainly a myth. But they do eat cattle, and this will pose a huge challenge to the conservationists, who have to convince private landowners to allow a jaguar corridor to run near or even across their private rangeland. Additional research in Belize at Coxcomb National Park provides good news. Proof that jaguars are abundant here. Rabinowitz also learns that each jaguar's territory is larger than some scientists had believed. It's another challenge to the creation of this corridor, but Rabinowitz remains committed.
What I'm happiest most about is that back there where there's no people, we now know that there's lots of jaguars having babies and roaming free and not worried about if they turn the next corner, will a shotgun be blasted in their face. But my life is not about saving just these jaguars now. It's about saving jaguars as a species. We will save jaguars throughout their existing range.
We now travel to Japan for an epic battle. Honeybees pollinate an estimated 1/3 of the food we eat, but their population has dropped in some areas by as much as 50% in just the last half century. There may be a number of reasons for this, such as overuse of pesticides and diseases spread by parasites. But in Japan, some honeybees aren't going without a fight. In fact, scientists have discovered that the Japanese bees can conquer an enemy many times their size.
It is spring on the Japanese island of Honshu, and the warm winds bring the promise of war. Lying just beneath the earth, a giant Japanese hornet rouses from her slumber and gets to work. A queen raising a vast army that's ready to kill in order to survive. Meanwhile, her intended prey floats serenely in the flowers above the hornet's lair, oblivious and hard at work. These European honeybees were imported by Japanese farmers to pollinate their fields. And they're seemingly unaware that they're being stalked. One giant hornet, an enterprising scout, finds a European honeybee colony and marks its location by secreting a pheromone. Soon after, a band of natural-born killers picks up the telltale scent and moves in for the attack. The battle is a rout. The giant hornets are 5 times the size of the imported European honeybees. "30 of them can annihilate a colony of 30,000 bees in just 3 hours. The bees manage to kill a few of their foes, despite the hornets' tough hides. But soon the ground is thick with the severed bee heads and bodies. Some make a last stand at the hive's entrance. But in the end, nearly every bee in the colony is dead or dying. The hungry hornets gorge themselves on honey and cart off bee larvae to feed their own youngsters. Every year, hornets kill millions of bees to ensure their own survival. But within nature's intricate web of checks and balances, there is a place for payback. These too are honeybees, but of a very different sort. They are native to Japan, and unlike their European cousins, they've evolved a secret weapon against the giant hornet. They too are stalked by an advance guard. This time, though, the bees set a trap. The scout moves into the hive. Its mission is to mark the spot with the telltale pheromone, so that an army of hornets can find it later. But the native honeybees seem to know what's coming and are determined to stop it. By swinging their abdomens, they signal their strategy to one another. Thermal photography reveals that the bees begin to vibrate, gradually raising their collective temperature to 117 degrees Fahrenheit. Japanese honeybees can tolerate a temperature of 118 degrees. Their victim's upper limit is only 115. The hornet scout is slowly roasted alive. And the secret of the honeybee's location dies with her. The delicate balance between hunter and hunted is maintained. The Japanese bees will see another season. Their nest is safe until next spring, when Honshu's winds of war will blow once again.
That wraps up this edition of Wild Chronicles. But be sure to join us next time when we team up with National Geographic researchers on an age-old quest, the search for the Fountain of Youth. I'm Boyd Mattson. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.
Wild Chronicles is sponsored by National Geographic Mission Programs. To find out more about your planet, come to www.nationalgeographic.com. Additional support provided by World Wildlife Fund, saving wildlife and wild places, and by Lindblad Expeditions, celebrating 5 decades of exploration to the wildest places on Earth.